Hey, this is Tom Leander, broadcaster for the Phoenix Suns. Listen to me as I visit with Elaine Goodman on Gogoodman.com.au.
Growing up in Phoenix as a sports fan, did basketball always take your preference?
Yeah, I started playing basketball as a young kid here in the Phoenix area. I played baseball, and basketball are probably my two favorite sports. But I loved the game. I thought practices were a lot more exciting than baseball. And I was a ball boy for the Phoenix Suns when I was young. So I used to go to all their games. I would help out with Walter Davis, who's one of our all-time great players, warm up before games, rebound for him, and able to sit under the basket during games and wipe up their sweat. So, yeah, I go back a long ways with the sport of basketball in this team.
When did you decide or realize that a career in sports media was your calling?
Probably my junior year in high school. I was point guard on the basketball team, and I looked at my dad, I looked at my brothers, and realized that we're all about 5'9", 5'10", and I was going to peak at about that height. And a career beyond high school, playing competitively, was going to be a long shot. And I just wanted to stay in sports, so I started thinking about different professions and being a broadcaster at that point. And so when I started looking at colleges, I focused in on universities that had good broadcasting programs. And I found Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. They had an on-campus radio station. Visited the campus. They let me sit in on their AM radio station and play a few records as a DJ. And then, so my freshman year there, I went right into the sports department, asked to be one of their sports reporters. And by my sophomore year, I was doing play-by-play for their basketball team at Loyola Marymount and traveling with the team.
Did you ever get to practice being a play-by-play caller, or were you thrown straight in?
Well, I would consider the college experience practice. It was a professionally run FM radio station, and it was heard throughout Los Angeles. But it was a great training ground. There's not a lot of pressure on doing games like that. But for a young kid, I was probably 18, 19 years old. I learned the preparation needed to go into each broadcast and each game, looking into the background of all the players, having a roster set for each team, and just the mechanics of doing play-by-play on a radio broadcast. That was better than anything I learned in class.
And moving, as you said, from Phoenix, where you grew up, to LA to study, how long did it take you to get to move back to Phoenix?
So I graduated from Loyola Marymount and sent out tapes, resumes all around the country trying to find a job in a small market. Out of probably 250 inquiries and letters that I sent out, I had 2 bites, 2 possible stations that would hire me. One was in Casper, Wyoming, and I'm not quite sure what I would have covered there, probably a lot of rodeos. And then the other was in Monterey, California, and that was the job that I ended up landing. And it was a perfect spot for me because you would cover local sports there, the high schools, but also you had access to the Bay Area, so I could cover the Giants and the A's, baseball, the Warriors and basketball, and the 49ers and football. So it was a perfect mix, and I spent 2 years there in Monterey, California, and then was really hoping to move back to Arizona. That's where my family and friends were, and there was an opportunity as a weekend sportscaster in Tucson, and I was hired by the CBS affiliate there as a sportscaster. So after my 2 years doing weekend sports in Monterey, moved to Tucson, worked there for about 3 years, and after that, the position opened up with the Phoenix Suns, and I jumped on it.
So it was about five or 6 years before you actually got to the big time.
Yeah, and again, when I was hired by the Suns, I was hired as a producer for their PreGame shows, and it was a lot of fun. We were very creative. We would put together the half-hour PreGame show, and we also did a post-game and halftime show. But there was a lot of work, a lot of production elements that went into it, so I was very much a reporter and producer as I was an on-air person. But along the way, as I started to gather more experience and I think trust from management, they saw the opportunity to move me into different opportunities within the organization because they also had an arena football league team, the Rattlers, that started up. So I started doing play-by-play for them. They also had an indoor soccer league team, the Arizona Sand Sharks, and I was doing some TV play-by-play for them as well. So I did all the Sun shows for about 10 years along with play-by-play of the other sports. And then the opportunity to do play-by-play on television for the Phoenix Suns came about, and I spent 9 years traveling with the team and doing play-by-play on television for them.
Do you remember the first time you were starstruck by a player, either as a kid or just, walking through the hallways at the Phoenix Suns?
Probably the first time I was starstruck was at Loyola Marymount. When I was doing the radio broadcast there, we also shared our gym with the Los Angeles Lakers and the LA Clippers. Both teams practiced at our gym at Loyola Marymount. And as kind of a Cub reporter, radio announcer on the college campus, I would take the opportunity to take my microphone and record some of the players saying, you can listen to Loyola Marymount basketball on KXLU. I'm James Worthy of the Lakers, or I'm Magic Johnson. Listen to LMU basketball right here on 98.9, or whatever our call numbers were. So that was the first time I really had direct contact with NBA players on a professional basis, and I was definitely starstruck. I mean, I was so nervous going up to Magic and Kareem and Worthy and Byron Scott and all those guys, but it was a lot of fun. They were always really good. You'd give them the card, and they'd read it, and they'd do a nice little plug or promo for your station. So that was really, I was around professional players as a youngster, so you could go back to, my days as a ball boy with the Suns, and I was definitely starstruck by being around Dick Van Arsdale, who was the original Sun. I mentioned Walter Davis, who's one of my all-time heroes, Ronnie Lee. I could go down the line of all the Suns players, just being around them. So I was originally starstruck there, but on a professional basis, probably when I was in college and had a chance to interface with NBA players.
Do you remember the first time someone of importance walked past you at Phoenix and said, "Hey Tom, how you doing?" and you realized, just yes, I'm in? Who was that person that really kind of cemented it for you that you were in the profession that you wanted to be in? I've had a couple of different experiences. I guess, as a kid growing up too, Alvin Adams was one of my idols. And when he was a rookie for the Suns in that 75-76 season, he was the Rookie of the Year, and he helped lead the Suns into the NBA Finals against the Celtics. And Alvin, to this day, still works for the Suns and the organization in operations. And it's surreal for me to even just pass him in the hallways now and go, wow, as a kid, I used to sit at my desk in my room and chart his shots, like his made shots, his missed shots, and his point total just by listening to the radio. And I do recall when I first started working for the Suns in 1993, passing him in the hallway and talking to him and thinking, wow, I'm actually now working along with Alvin Adams, and we're almost like colleagues here. And he knew my name because I'd been doing some TV work. So that was probably one of the biggest thrills when Alvin Adams knew me by my first name, and now I see him in the hallway still. And heck, I just came back from a preseason game in Houston, and I was able to sit next to Al McCoy, and they actually had me doing the analysis for the radio broadcast. Tim Kempton, our normal radio analyst, couldn't make the trip. So I sat next to Al, and I actually was his analyst for the night, and I still pinch myself and go, you got to be kidding me. I grew up listening to Al, and I idolized him and all of his phrases and just how good he is at play-by-play. And to actually be sitting next to him, being his analyst, is just so far-fetched. I couldn't even write a book. Nobody would believe it. Being a reasonably young Suns fan, as I am, I don't really know much about the franchise pre the 1990s. You said you started there in 93. What was the franchise like back then? Who were the big players? What was the reputation of the franchise? And who did you basically have to beat up to get into the commentary box? So, in 1993, or when I started? Because I started with them, probably in 1977 as a ball boy. Right. Yeah. So back then, how did you kind of plan your trip up the food chain at the franchise? I didn't really have a grand plan. When I was hired by the Suns in 1993 to do their shows, I just wanted to come in and be creative and kind of do the things that I had been doing as a sportscaster in Monterey and in Tucson. I love to do positive, upbeat stories. I like to do anything different. I've never tried to be bland or just fall into the stereotype of, the sports reporter that just covers the news. I always, especially with the access that we have with the players, we're part of the team, so I think there's a trust level there. And I started developing some branded elements in the show, such as Suns Undercover, where we took a lot of the Suns players with hidden cameras out onto the streets in various different occupations. We had one of our Suns players, a 7-footer Luke Longley, working as a bag boy. An Australian guy.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Australian guy, exactly. Luke Longley. There you go. He was great. So he was bagging groceries, and I'll never forget a little old lady looking up at him going, well, you're a tall one. You should play basketball. And so we had a lot of fun with that. I had Sean Marion on a pedal cab, Rodney Rogers delivering pizza, and as he delivered the pizza, the customer opened it up and saw that he had taken a bite out of one of the pieces. But what was the customer going to say? I mean, Rodney Rogers is 6'7", 230 pounds, so the reactions were priceless. So we had a lot of fun, and I think just the creativity and the work ethic of, and loving to come to work every day, that kind of built up maybe my status within the organization, and they kind of wanted to reward me over the years and gave me the opportunity to move into play-by-play.
Who were some of the, big names at the Phoenix Suns in the commentary box or behind the scenes? What was the club, what was the franchise back then? I mean, before I was born, were they kind of a powerhouse?
Well, I mean, as far as broadcasting goes, it's always been Al McCoy. He's been the voice of the Suns for, 43, 44 years now. So Al has always been the number one guy, whether it be radio or television. He used to do simulcasts, radio and television, for a number of years. I think probably the most popular pairing was when he was doing the games with Cotton Fitzsimmons, one of our former coaches. So Al and Cotton were the broadcasters. And I've been blessed from a broadcasting standpoint to have worked with Al McCoy. Gary Bender did our games for a number of years. He was a famous national sportscaster who called NCAA championship games and Masters golf tournaments and all sorts of huge football games as well. And now Steve Albert of the Albert family. I mean, you have Marv Albert, Steve Albert, and Al Albert. We've had a really good line of play-by-play announcers. And then analysts, Cotton Fitzsimmons did it, and now we have Eddie Johnson, the former Suns player, who is excellent at what he does. And I work with Tom Chambers, who was one of my favorite players growing up. And even though I told him when I was working for the Suns as a reporter and he was still playing, I despised going to his locker room and to his locker space, because he was one of the surliest, meanest guys after games. And now here I am working with him, and he's a member of the media. It's amazing how they change after their playing career is over. But I give him a hard time, going, oh, boy, you were a tough one to crack when we went to interview you after a games, because he was pretty salty. And now I consider him one of my best friends in the world, and I wouldn't trade working with him for anything. He's the best at what he does. I mean, across the country. I mean, Charles is great on TNT, but Tom Chambers, to me, it's right there at that level, because he's opinionated, he's colorful, his timing is impeccable. I can ask him or say anything to him, and he'll have a reaction, and he's just a gem to work with and to know and to be a friend.
Is there really an Albert brother called Al?
Yeah, Al Albert.
Wow. Is it like Albert
Steve,
Albert
Al,
or Alfred Albert?
Yeah, Steve, Al, and Marv, and I think there might even be one other one.
Is it Alfred or Albert? Do you know?
I think it's Albert. No, it can't be Albert, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. You'll have to ask Steve out. You can interview Steve on your next one, your next podcast.
I'd love to do that. I listened to an interview you did a while ago. I think it was with Espo, and you said you used to do 6 hours of preparation before each broadcast. What did this extensive warm-up involve? Well, and that's when I was traveling with the team, so I would get up there. The game would be at 7 o'clock. I'd be up at about 9 in the morning, go have my coffee, and then I'd just dive into the notes. They had a lot of game notes that you pour through. I had roster sheets for each team. I have a file on every team where, during the course of years, I'll be clipping articles and putting them in a file. And so I'll put those little nuggets in on my cheat sheet, on my roster. After, before you know it, that the time of the day has just flown by, and it usually is 5 to 6 hours of preparing that, reading all of it. When you show up into a particular NBA city, they have all sorts of notes and articles for you to read. So it's very comprehensive and time-consuming. And I enjoyed it while I did it, but boy, I tell you what, I don't even want to think back about how many hours I sat in a chair at a desk in a hotel room just poring over numbers and notes. It's part of what you have to do for the job, but I'm kind of happy doing what I'm doing now, where I'm more out in the field and interviewing players and doing more interaction with fans and more personality stuff. I like the play-by-play, but boy, there's a lot of preparation involved. Did you learn any commentary tricks from previous broadcasters? You've mentioned Al McCoy.
and all the other guys that you look up to. What have you kind of gained any tricks and kind of put their commentary style or their on-air personality style into your style?
No, I listen to lots of different announcers, and now after having done especially play-by-play, you listen to them, how they go to commercial break, how they talk over highlights, how they set up their analyst. So I've probably taken, lots of different cues from different play-by-play announcers. Certainly a lot from Al. Growing up listening to him, he was so colorful and had many phrases that were coined, Shazam and Zingo the Strings and Heartbreak Hotel and all the different phrases that he came up with. And I grew up that way. And then I was in L.A. for college, and I heard Chick Hearn, and he coined even more phrases than Al. I mean, and Chick was the king of just catchy phrases and being colorful in his delivery. And I loved that. I loved how they were so creative and fun to listen to. And to me, that's the real challenge, because really, when you break it down, I mean, the game of basketball, like any other sport, it's kind of the same thing going on. Guys dribbling up and down, shooting the basketball, either it goes in or it doesn't. You're dribbling on one side of the court or the other. But these guys have made it a trademark of theirs to describe the same thing in so many different ways and in so many colorful ways. And I love that. I'm just all about being creative and being a little bit different. And so I probably took most of my style from them. And again, just trying not to be, I don't want to be just like them. I wanted to kind of come up with my own phrases too, but I didn't want to be that boring, drab play-by-play announcer that just didn't put any life or any of his own personality into the broadcast. And I think that's just kind of being true to yourself, but also, not losing the fact of the fans are there and they're watching and they want the game. So don't get in the way of the game. Don't miss any big plays or calls. But if along the way you can add a little bit of spice to it, I'm all for that.
Obviously, you've learned a lot over the time from being around the franchise, but did it take you a while to become confident critiquing and analysing plays without having played basketball at the top level?
No, not really. I think, and I continued to play basketball until I was probably 42, 43.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Again, not a high level, but, playing in leagues and things. So I think once you play basketball, you really understand the game. And, even in our analytics department, these guys, break down the game with lots of numbers and information that is mind-boggling, and you would think, gosh, they probably don't know the first thing about really running a play, but they do. I mean, we watch it. So I don't think have to play at the highest level to be able to certainly describe it or have an opinion on it. So I never had a problem with that, and being around the game too, you watch it, and you watch strategies, and you see how coaches handle different situations, how they handle their players. And just through experience, I think you can become your own type of expert. And that's why I think it's a good balance. And, most broadcasts will have play-by-play and the former players so that you can both balance each other out. But I've always felt very comfortable in my knowledge of the game, asking lots of questions of the players, current and former players, talking to coaches. And I've been coaching youth basketball and high school basketball for a number of years, so you get to try out some of the plays and strategies. So, no, I'm very comfortable with the sport of basketball.
What's the difference for you? Do you prefer now being the pre-game, halftime, and post-game show host as opposed to being the play-by-play caller? Do they both have positives and negatives? What's the difference for you? And do you think you'll ever go back to being a play-by-play caller and just try it again?
Yeah, that's, if somebody out there wants to give me another shot at it, I might consider it. But, again, I just went on this trip with the team to Houston, and it made me realize how I don't miss traveling. I mean, the traveling is really a grind. Even though they're on charter planes and charter buses and stay at 5-star hotels, I mean, the travel could not be better. But I don't miss that aspect of it. I missed a lot of birthdays and special events with my kids and my wife over the years, so I can still be around the game now and then go back to what I'm probably best at doing anyways, is hosting a show. Obviously, it's much easier when I'm working with a talent like Tom Chambers, and we have kind of the chemistry and the relationship that we have. I think it really comes across on the air. The game, the game of basketball itself and the play-by-play, you really have to stay with the action. You can't be, as creative sometimes. And again, that's the way it should be. So I prefer right now, if I were to have a choice between the two, I really like the pregame, halftime, postgame shows. You're more in charge of the content. There's more time to breathe, more time to be creative and to give your opinion and commentary. And so right now that's my preference. But sure, I'd go back to play-by-play at some point, but it's not on the forefront right now for me.
Can you take me through what your average day entails as a Phoenix Suns TV broadcaster?
Well, I mean, every day is a little bit different because if it's a game day, it's one thing. If it's middle of July, it's something else. So that's part of the beauty of my job, too. We have a nice long off season to recharge our batteries. But I think on a typical game day, I will, certainly hop on the computer, go through the hoops hype, read ESPN, NBA, pick up as many articles. I'll go to the local newspapers of the team that we're playing. So if we're playing the Rockets, I'll read the Houston Chronicle, try to stay up to date on all that, gather as much information, whatever is timely for that day, not just for the Suns and their opponent, but also around the NBA that we could discuss. And we try to keep the show as fresh as possible. So I'll read through that. Then I'll contact our producer with some ideas. He'll send me the rundown of the show. We'll talk about the content. He'll give me his ideas. I'll throw in some input. I always like to come up with topics, too, that I know will put a charge into the show and into Tom Chambers, that any sort of connection between him and the coach of the other team, or maybe a great game that he had against that team in the past, and with Eddie Johnson as well. So a lot of collaboration goes on and planning for what will go into the show. And then I'll show up to the arena usually around 5 o'clock for a 6:30 pregame show, meet with the producers, go and talk to coaches, players, and then hit the air about 6:30, and then we're there until the game is over and the postgame show is finished, usually around 10.
What about during the off season? What do you do on any given day?
Again, it varies. We'll go out sometimes and do some features if the players are in town. The Suns basketball camp is going on. Sometimes I'll go out with a cameraman and do some interviews and stockpile some material that we can use in the coming season. Other times, I mow the back lawn, make sure the dogs are fed, and the kids are being picked up from school or camp.
Wow.
I have a lot of flexibility in the summertime. Don't tell my employer.
Do the kids get involved in basketball as well? Are they Phoenix Suns fans?
Oh, huge. Yeah, the whole family. I mean, they know who butters their bread, but we're all Suns fans. And I have 2 tickets to each of the games, so my wife will go to some games. My youngest son, Bryson, is now in high school. He'll go to games. I have a son who's in college now at Gonzaga in Spokane, and my daughter just finished nursing school here in town. So whenever they're available or in town, they love to go to the games. And more than anything, they like the fact that I can help give them some access down below near the Suns locker room, where after the game they can say hello to Goran Dragic. Our whole family is just in love with Goran, and he's just the best. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And a lot of the players, too. Gerald Green is just wonderful. I think that's one of the best parts of my job, too, is, there are a lot of events that we'll go to with the players, and sometimes I can take my family or my kids, and they have a chance to meet the players, and that's a huge thrill for them.
Well, now you got Goran and Zoran, so share the love a little bit.
Yes, exactly. And Zoran is every bit as nice as Goran is. I mean, you can see that they are out of the same mold, and it's really wonderful to see the two of them together. I'm not sure how much Zoran is going to play this year. I mean, I hope he sees some court time, but we're so loaded at that position. And I think he's still dealing with the transition of the speed of the game and the skill level here in the NBA, that it may take him a year or so. But, he's a feisty player. I think if we're ever in a hole and we need a little spark, he might be a guy that Jeff Hornacek turns to. But you're right. I mean, we're just all so happy about this whole brother ball situation. Obviously, Markieff and Marcus love being together and have made it a goal of theirs to play the rest of their NBA career on the same team, because I think they definitely flourish when they're together. And then now having the Dragic boys, and maybe somewhere down the line we can acquire Mason Plumlee from Brooklyn to put him with Miles.
As you may have guessed by now, I am a big Phoenix Suns supporter, so I want to talk a little bit about the team. I started following the Suns around the time Mike D'Antoni came along and Steve Nash came back after his stint at Dallas, when we had, that fast-paced game, the distinctive cornerstones of Nash, Marion, and Stoudemire. But since then, the franchise has been through a few different coaches, game styles, and now we have a predominantly guard-focused lineup. How have you viewed the changes over the years in players, personnel, gameplay, and in hindsight, what would you say have been some good and bad decisions? I mean, was trading Marion for Shaq a good decision? Was getting Michael Beasley in a good decision? What's some of the events that stand out for you, or changes that stand out for you?
Yeah, that's a loaded question because so much has happened.
I know.
But, I'll go back to the Mike D'Antoni years. I mean, he revolutionized the game of basketball with his offensive philosophy and moving the ball up and down the floor. And I think other coaches and teams took notice that you can win that way. Now, did he win the ultimate prize? No, he came very close. And if not for, a broken orbital bone for Joe Johnson, or a Rajabelle calf injury, or Steve Nash being slammed into the scorer's table and Amari Stoudemire being suspended along with Boris Diaw, I mean, the Suns could have won it all. So I think there was some bad luck along the way. But our fans are definitely used to that style of basketball. I mean, it goes back to the Cotton Fitzsimmons days when the team was scoring 118, 120 points a night. I think they want offensive, high-power, upbeat, fast-paced basketball. And Jeff Hornacek has helped bring that back. And, we've had some lulls over the years with, when we had Terry Porter come in here, and that didn't work out very well. And, again, part of that was because we had Shaq, and they felt like they had to utilize him in the low post. Then we had Lance Blanks come in and kind of change the culture around here, not for the better. And Lindsey Hunter didn't work out real well, so that was short-lived. But Alvin Gentry, when he was the head coach, I think did a tremendous job. He's one of my all-time favorites, and he kept up that system. I mean, once he came in and took over for Terry Porter, I think the Suns scored, like 130 points their next couple of games, and they were back to that fun brand of basketball. The players enjoy it, the camaraderie in the locker room was at an all-time high. So I think that's where we're moving our way back toward, and we saw quite a bit of that last year. I mean, this is now, I think, my 23rd year with the team, and last year was one of the most exhilarating seasons, because we've been coming off such lean years. But to see the players enjoy the style, enjoy being around each other, a good group of guys, too. You can go into the locker room, and I said this after last season, there wasn't a bad apple in the group. There wasn't one guy that I would see and go, oh, God, I got to turn my back. You don't want to talk to him or be around him. It was a wonderful group, and I think we have a similar situation this year. I mean, it's going to be a challenge. We're going to miss Channing Frye and Ish Smith and Deontay Christmas because they were such not only valuable contributors outside of Deontay, who didn't play much, but Ish did a great job coming off the bench, and obviously Channing. But those three were critical in the locker room, very upbeat, outgoing guys, and that's tough to replace, to keep that kind of chemistry. So we'll see who can help fill that void this year. But going back to your question about, some of the moves over the years, certainly, Beasley was a disaster. Shaq did not turn out. I don't blame them for giving it a shot. At that point, I think the team was pretty stale, and Sean Marion was making some noise about wanting to be traded. So some of those deals were forced by circumstances or by the players. But again, I think Jeff Hornacek knows what a wing formula is. Ryan McDonough has done an excellent job, has a keen eye for talent and putting a team together. So I really feel confident that they have this franchise back on the right track.
And I have a couple of favourite players over the past 10 or 12 years from the Phoenix Suns. One is Steve Nash, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and the other one was Jared Dudley. I was a bit annoyed to see him go, but luckily Bledsoe has worked out. We almost lost Bledsoe as well. Is there tension that goes around the entire franchise when a player is reluctant to sign?
I mean, it's tough to say. It kind of depends on who the player is. When you talk about Jared Dudley, we all love Jared. I mean, he was a great personality in the locker room, fun to be around. We had a lot of fun with him. We would even kind of make fun of him a little bit. We had the Jared Dudley Superstar Challenge where we basically, tested his athleticism or lack thereof with some silly events against other top-notch athletes, and had a good time with that. But, at the end of the day, we all knew, too, that the Suns needed to become more athletic. So that, there's always that chance that a player could be dealt. And Jared was just in that situation where we needed to upgrade the athleticism of our team. And as much as it's difficult to see a good character like that leave, for the sake of the team and for winning and trying to change the culture around the team in terms of just skill level that they needed to make some drastic moves. That was not as much of a surprise, I don't think. There have been other moves, and there are times where, difficult decisions have had to be made, but the correct ones. I mean, you talked about Steve Nash. The Suns knew that he was on the last legs of his career, and boy, we'd all love to see him finish his career here in Phoenix, but I think the timing was right for him to move along and in his own life and career, and for the Suns to move along. And Amari Stoudemire, the Suns made him a very fair proposal and contract offer. Robert Sarver, I think it was one of the smartest decisions he's made, was to backload the contract with provisions that he had to play a certain amount of games. And if he didn't meet those provisions, then he wouldn't be paid the exorbitant amount of money that he's now being paid by the New York Knicks. And they're still reeling from that decision, and he's eating up so much of their salary cap space. So some of those decisions were difficult. Hard to see Nash and Amari and Jared Dudley and Sean Marion go. But at the same time, you get to a point in the season and a point in a player's career where it's time to make a change.
And what about the tension going around the franchise when an integral player like Bledsoe is reluctant to sign? Do you feel that as people behind the scenes, or is it more the players and coaching staff and player managers that have to deal with that?
Again, I'm sure there's tension up there just in terms of the anxiety. What's going to happen? Will he sign? Is it a fair offer? Who's making, fans are wondering who's making this decision. Is this Eric Bledsoe? Does he want to be here in Phoenix? At the end of the day, and I was one of those people that wondered whether or not Eric wanted to be here, it was a very smart move by him and his agent. I mean, they were able to make a lot more money, and all you have to do is, turn on the TV and see that Kevin Durant is out for 6 to 8 weeks, or a football player is lost for the year with a torn ACL. I mean, these athletes put their bodies on the line every day, and their career could end at any moment. So I don't fault them whatsoever for going out and trying to procure the best contract possible. The Eric Bledsoe situation, I think the way that it turned out was fair for both sides. Suns added a little bit more money, another year to the contract. There was no out clauses for him, so he had to commit to the team, and I think he's shown up in great shape with a whole new attitude and a bounce in his step. And so once I saw that, I think I, along with the rest of the staff, the coaches, general manager, fans, we felt Eric was here to stay and that his heart was here in Phoenix. And I think any fan base is going to feel that way. They just want to know that that player wants to be there. And we never got that feeling from Eric last year because he never said that. A lot of it was being orchestrated by his agent, who was, again, very smart. He didn't want to tip his hand. Sometimes if you go, wow, Eric would love to be there in Phoenix, he'll do whatever it takes to stay there, you're giving up some of your leverage and bargaining power. So as it all turned out, we have Eric now for another 5 years. He's extremely talented, and it's still a movable contract. I mean, at some point, if Eric or the Suns feel like they're better off going different directions, he's making good money, but it's not one of those contracts like Kobe has or that Amari has that you cannot trade.
Do you think that the players get too much power? I mean, there's so many different contracts. There's no trade clause. There's restricted. There's unrestricted. Do you find it hard to keep up with all the different kind of contracts that are out there, or is it because it's your job to keep up?
I'm tired of talking about contracts. Really, yeah, I know. It's unfortunate that's what it's come down to. Instead of just breaking down a player, his personality, his skills, his worth to a team, we talk more about what he's doing to the salary cap and how much money he's going to make this year, or when his contract is up, will he be a restricted free agent, unrestricted free agent? It's a shame that that's what it's come down to in all sports, and that you've got to try to slot players under the salary cap. I wish we could go back to just talking about them as athletes and contributors to the team and to the community.
So what do you think about the Suns' chances this upcoming season? As I mentioned, we've gone with a predominantly guard-focused lineup. Do you think we can match up against the likes of Cleveland, who have bulked up on their big stocks with LeBron and Kevin Love, or the champions San Antonio, have Tim Duncan, who's a really good power forward? Every team kind of most teams kind of have their cornerstone guard with their big, forwards and center. Do you think we can match up well being a predominantly guard-focused team?
That's a good question. I think we're going to have to wait and see. And a lot of people had questions about the team last year. I have questions about the team this year. And you talk about bulking up and taking on some of these teams that have inside presence. We don't have that. Miles Plumlee is a good, solid center who's still growing in the league. Alex Len has not been able to stay healthy. And then you move on to Markieff Morris possibly being the next center in line, Shavlik Randolph. So we're certainly at a disadvantage in my mind right now in terms of experience and size. But I love how the league has really turned into more of a guard-oriented league. When you talk about some of these teams, usually you're talking about their point guard. You talk about the team in Golden State with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and you talk about Derrick Rose and how important he is to the Bulls. I mean, the Bulls were a good team, but you need that guard play. You need the leader. You need the point guard and a good shooting guard, small forward to run up and down the floor. I mean, I think that's where the NBA, again, is part of that Mike D'Antoni revolution. We've gone into that. The fans want to see the fast-paced style of play, more scoring. I'm glad the days of the old Pistons are dead when they were playing 82 to 78 games. So in order to play that style and that pace, you need to have talented guards that are athletic and quick and get to the hoop, that can step out and spread the floor. San Antonio was a perfect example last year. I mean, they never relied on a big inside presence. I mean, they had Duncan in there, but he was not always a focal point of their offense. They just had great ball movement. Boris Diaw was a huge, I think, advantage for them, too, to have him on the floor, a guy who can play inside but also pass the ball with an ability that I think is unmatched since Magic Johnson. I really felt in watching the finals last year, I had never seen a player, especially that size. Boris is 6'9", like Magic was, that can see the floor, pass it out to a three-point shooter. So you can't say that San Antonio was a team that relied on their inside game. They just had great ball movement and chemistry. And so I think that's where the league's going. I think you do need to have good guard play. You need to have a stretch four that can bring the defenders out so that it'll open up lanes for your guard. And for the Suns, their key is going to be they have to be able to battle inside, get rebounds, to initiate that fast break. But if I were to have a preference, I want four guys on the court that can all shoot, put the ball on the floor and score, and have one banger that can come out, set picks, grab some defensive rebounds, maybe a couple offensive rebounds. But again, in this fast-paced system, you're going to see a lot of long rebounds, and your guards and small forwards can collect a lot of long rebounds as well. I don't think you need to have two big men in there. I think you could have one big man and four good scorers to be effective in this league, and that's the kind of basketball I like to watch. And I think we have the type of team that you can throw out there that will run into more talented teams and more experienced teams like Cleveland or San Antonio, Oklahoma City when they're at full strength.
Even the Clippers, the Clippers.
Loaded. They're so loaded. But because we have those guards and those scorers, we get them into our brand of basketball, we'll have a chance every night.
And as you've mentioned, you've been hosting now for just over 20 years, since 1993. Are you content in the position, or do you want to move into, I guess, a team manager role eventually and try and move up the food chain a little bit further? Are you content in the media side of things?
No, yeah, I'm definitely. This is what I've done all my life. I have no interest in going into the front office or being a scout or a coach for the team. That's too much work. This is fun. I enjoy this. I like the creativity. I like the flexibility as well. I mean, those guys never stop working. During the off season, you have preparations for the draft. You have the pre-draft workouts. You have summer league. They have a couple of weeks off, and it's a grind. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing.
Have you ever been interested in pursuing, I guess, news broadcasting, or has sport always been the passion for you? Yeah,
sports. I have a hard time just watching the news or reading the news in general. It's too depressing.
Fair enough. Well, sometimes sport can be depressing as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially over the last month or two. It has been very depressing. I think it's been a low point in sports in my lifetime. Certainly this whole Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson, and it's just on. And the negativity, once Sports Illustrated decided to put a blurry photo of Ray Rice and his soon-to-be wife, going into the elevator, I'm like, what has happened to sports? This used to be about fun and entertainment and skill, and now it's just about, again, just some of the ugliness in our world. And I thought that's what sports was supposed to be, a kind of a release from the day-to-day difficulties in life. So I hope we can go back to that, and that's what I like to focus on.
That's kind of started to happen a bit in Australian sport as well. So I want to ask you a few questions just about sport generally and the culture. So, firstly, do you think loyalty has a place in sport? The big ones for me in regards to loyalty are Paul Pierce going to Brooklyn from Boston after something like 17 years with the Celtics. And also, we mentioned Steve Nash, but that was probably more of a team decision as well. Do you think there should be some loyalty from the player or the franchise, or does loyalty go out the window once you get past the age of 35 or something like that?
Well, I don't even think it's really age as much as it is the length of a contract. And players will tell you there's no loyalty in the organization many times because they will trade you. They have the opportunity to trade you and have traded some of the biggest stars if that's what's going to make the team better and the organization succeed. So I think the players' mentality is that, if there's not going to be a loyalty coming from the organization shouldn't expect that of the players. So I don't think loyalty is as big a part of professional sports now as it used to be, which is unfortunate because I love the days of, Larry Bird playing for one team his entire career, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, although he was traded by Milwaukee to the Lakers. But most of these guys spending their career, Alvin Adams, with our team, spending his entire career with the Suns. That just doesn't exist anymore because of the salary cap and because of teams competing against each other and the terms of contracts, lengths of contract. So I don't think loyalty is as important now. It sure is nice when you see those relationships, as we see in San Antonio with Ginobili, Parker, and Tim Duncan, players that are willing to accept less money, to stay together and to be in a city, be part of a community, and to play together as a unit because they know they're going to have a better chance to be successful, and they give up money in doing so. Dirk Nowitzki has done that with the Dallas Mavericks. That's always heartwarming to see.
Is it hard, you mentioned this before, but is it hard from the commentary side of things to see some players go when you've been able to mingle with them pretty much every day for sometimes up to 5, 6, 7 years or more?
Mm-hmm. Oh, no doubt. It's just like having a friend or a roommate in college, and all of a sudden he goes to another school. I mean, the same thing here. You develop a comfort level and a relationship with players, but then you start over and somebody new comes in, and Isaiah Thomas has just come in, getting to know him. Last year it was Gerald Green. I've never met Gerald in my life, and now I consider him a friend and one of my favorite players in terms of a personal relationship that I've ever met. He's just very engaging, warm, friendly, honest. I love it. So when one player leaves, another player comes in. It just opens up an opportunity to develop a new relationship.
I know the NBA has had a big issue with racism recently over at the Clippers. For the life of me, I can't remember the old owner's name, but that's probably not a problem. We've experienced a little bit of this over in Australian sport as well. Do you think it is possible to rid a sporting code completely of racism and even homophobia? I mean, we saw in the NFL a homosexual player got drafted to one of the teams, but he's been delisted now. Do you think this discrimination can be rid?
I really don't concern myself with that. It kind of goes back to the whole news business. I mean, that's something if you want to get a news reporter to talk about or an activist or anything, I'd rather just talk about the game. I mean, I'm all for diversity and any sort of racism, any sort of stereotyping, bigotry, I am absolutely against. I like open and affirming relationships and organizations, but it's not something I really like to talk about.
That's fair enough. So next point, something that I love about US sports is that each team has their own commentary team and their own channel to broadcast the games of the local city. I'm assuming this wouldn't work in Australia because we don't have the population and we don't have the money within the sports that the American sports do. Do you like this system? What are the pros and cons of having each particular team having their own kind of broadcasting system?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been that way for a long time. That's never really changed. Every team has had their own broadcasters, their own outlets. The only thing that's really changed is DirecTV and NBA TV, where you can pick up games and other broadcasters for their teams. But I like that. I think all local fans would like to hear their own announcers. They're going to show more favoritism toward their team, which I think they should. I mean, I don't want to listen to the San Antonio Spurs announce team when I'm watching the Spurs-Suns game. I want to hear Al McCoy or Steve Albert, and I want to hear our team's perspective, and I want to hear our announcers engaged and more enthusiastic when the team is doing well, because I'm a fan like everybody else here. So I like the way that it's set up.
What's the difference? A big word in American sport is franchise. What's the difference between a club and a franchise? In Australia, we call them pretty much footy clubs or basketball clubs, but America is big on the word franchise. Is there a difference, or is it just on a bigger scale?
No, it's the same thing. A club, the Phoenix Suns basketball club, I think refers to their whole organization. The franchise is actually a franchise of the NBA and its own entity, but there's really no difference. It's just terminology. The Suns franchise, same thing as the Suns club.
And finally, as I mentioned before, my favourite player of all time is Steve Nash. You know, I have a signed collage on my wall that I got for my 21st birthday, and he's in the top 3 people that I'd want to interview one day. What is he like as a person? I mean, his work ethic, his leadership, as a guy around the franchise. I assume you would have maybe been to his house for dinner, or you would have had him over for dinner. Is he somebody you miss around the club? Do you still get to chat to him every now and then? What's he like?
Yeah, no, I saw him a little bit this summer, but he's moved to Los Angeles, and I'll see him when the Suns will take on the Lakers, or if he's here in town. But in his early days, we definitely developed a friendship. I was lucky enough to be at the airport when he first arrived for his pre-draft workout. We were given a tip that there was a player coming in the Suns were interested in. We wanted to follow somebody through that pre-draft process. So we picked him up at the airport, followed him to his workout when he worked out for Danny Ainge and the Suns, and lo and behold, the Suns drafted him. So I've kind of known him from day one, the first time he stepped foot here in Phoenix, and actually did have dinner with him. He came over to the house his rookie year and had dinner with my wife and I, brought a couple of his friends because he was a rookie, didn't know a whole lot of people, and he's just been one of the best. He's a very intellectual person, smart. He thinks about things deeply. He's concerned about other people. He's concerned about the environment. He's concerned about politics, and he's been opinionated about different wars and things. So he's willing to state his opinion. He also has a love of movies and production, and he's just a very cerebral and interesting person. I always have enjoyed my relationship with him, and I miss him. Here in Phoenix, I think we all do. Suns fans just still have a love affair with him. But when I see him, he's still the best, and nothing's going to change that, even though he's a Laker.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I hope to get over and see a game one day, and
awesome.
maybe meet you face to face. Cool. Thank you for talking to me. Have a great night.
Thanks, Elaine.